Evelyn Harrington had everything anyone could ever want. As the only heir to the Harrington fortune, she lived in a grand mansion, attended high society events, and was known across the country for her beauty, wealth, and grace. But none of it mattered. Something was wrong and no one could figure out why. For the past few months, Evelyn had been getting weaker. At first it was subtle, a little fatigue, some dizziness. But over time it grew worse. Her energy drained by the hour, and no matter how many tests she underwent, no doctor could find the cause. She had visited 20 specialists, each one more qualified than the last. Each of them ran their own battery of tests, searching for a diagnosis. Yet each time the results were the same. Everything was normal. There was no explanation for her symptoms. Frustration boiled inside her. She felt trapped in a body that was failing her, but nobody had the answers. Her family, desperate to help, offered more solutions. Private doctors, experimental treatments, even holistic medicine. But nothing worked. In the grand corridors of her mansion, Evelyn's life had begun to feel empty. The wealth, the luxury, it didn't matter when her body was betraying her. She could feel it getting worse every day, and soon, her once shining world started to crumble around her. Her family insisted on trying a new set of doctors, this time from the best medical institution in the country, but Evelyn was losing hope. The doctors were baffled. They kept asking the same questions, running the same tests, and the answer was always, "We don't know." One day, as Evelyn sat in her plush armchair, feeling the weight of her illness, her thoughts wandered. How could she have everything and yet nothing? How could no one find the answer to a problem that had become so real to her? At that moment, she glanced at the window and noticed Tom, the janitor, cleaning the hallway outside her room. He was a quiet, unassuming man, one of the invisible people who worked in the background. But as Evelyn watched him through the window, something caught her attention. Was that a tiny clue? Tom had always been the kind of man who stayed out of the way. He wasn't used to being noticed. As a janitor at Harrington Medical, his life revolved around cleaning hallways, mopping floors, and ensuring that everything was spotless for the doctors and patients. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills. And most importantly, it allowed him to take care of his son, Max, after his wife had passed away 2 years ago. Tom's days were simple. He'd wake up at 5 a.m., make a quick breakfast for Max, and then head off to work. It wasn't easy being a single dad. Max had special needs and his condition required constant attention. Tom's life was a constant juggling act, but he did it without complaint. His son was his world, and as long as he had a roof over their heads, he was happy. But there was one thing that always stood out to Tom: Evelyn Harrington. He had seen her around the hospital a few times, surrounded by her entourage and being treated like royalty. Evelyn was always impeccably dressed in expensive designer clothes, walking with a quiet grace that made her seem almost untouchable. Yet Tom had noticed something in her eyes, the subtle weariness, the hint of sadness, as if she was carrying a weight that even her wealth couldn't lift. One morning, as he was pushing his cleaning cart down the hallway, he saw her again. She was sitting in one of the chairs in the lobby, alone this time, her face pale and drawn. Her usual elegance was gone, replaced by a look of exhaustion. Tom slowed his pace, unsure of why he was staring, but something inside him stirred. Evelyn didn't notice him at first, her eyes fixed on the floor. But when she looked up, their eyes met for a brief moment. For a split second, she seemed almost vulnerable, like a person who had lost all the power and control that came with her wealth. She was a woman who was not used to being seen in such a state. Tom quickly turned his gaze back to his cleaning, not wanting to intrude, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with her. He had seen many patients come and go through the hospital, but Evelyn was different. There was an unspoken tension around her. She wasn't just dealing with a physical ailment. There was something more profound at play. That afternoon, while cleaning the hallway outside Evelyn's room, Tom happened to overhear a conversation between two doctors. They were discussing her case, the same one that had baffled everyone. The diagnosis was unclear, and they were growing frustrated. "There's just no explanation," one of the doctors said. "Her tests are all normal." "It doesn't make sense." Tom's ears perked up. The conversation was mundane to anyone else, but to him it was a signal. He'd been cleaning that same hallway for years and had seen patients come and go. But there was something about this situation that didn't sit right. As he finished his work, Tom took a moment to look at the medical charts that were left unattended by the doctors. He knew it was against protocol, but his curiosity got the better of him. Evelyn's chart lay on the counter, and as he glanced at it, he noticed something small, a tiny detail that had been overlooked by everyone else. It was a subtle symptom that the doctors had missed in their haste, a slight rash on Evelyn's neck. It was barely noticeable, hidden beneath her high-collared dress, but Tom had seen it when she had been sitting in the chair earlier. The rash wasn't something that immediately jumped out, but it fit perfectly with the symptoms Evelyn had been displaying: fatigue, dizziness, and a sense of overall weakness. Tom's heart raced. Could it be? The doctors hadn't mentioned it. In fact, it wasn't listed anywhere in her records. The rash could be the key, a sign that something was seriously wrong, something everyone had missed. Tom knew he had to act. But what could a janitor do? He wasn't a doctor. He didn't have any qualifications or the right to intervene. But as a father, Tom understood the importance of noticing the smallest things. And this tiny clue, the rash, could be the one thing that saved Evelyn's life. He thought about his son Max, and how every day he had to look for the smallest signs that something might be wrong. In his own quiet way, Max had taught Tom how to pay attention to the little things, to never ignore a sign, no matter how small. With a sense of urgency growing in him, Tom made up his mind. He couldn't let this slip away. He would go to Evelyn's family and the doctors. He had to make them see it. They had all missed this tiny clue, but Tom wasn't about to let Evelyn slip through the cracks. Tom stood in the dimly lit hallway of Harrington Medical, his heart pounding as he stared at the small note he had scribbled on his cleaning cart. The clue he had discovered, the rash on Evelyn's neck, was something the doctors had completely missed, but was it enough to solve her mysterious condition? He couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. It was so easy for the medical professionals to overlook the smallest of details when they were focused on the bigger picture. But sometimes, it's the little things that make all the difference, he thought. For years, Tom had prided himself on his ability to notice things others couldn't. It was how he'd managed to keep his small family afloat after his wife had passed away. He'd learned to be observant, to pay attention to his son Max's needs, to track patterns that others might miss. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was work that had kept them alive, kept them going. But now, standing in the corridor of the hospital, Tom felt like he was stepping into uncharted territory. He was a janitor. He didn't have the qualifications, the title, or the respect to step into the world of doctors and experts. Yet the knowledge gnawed at him. He had seen enough over the years to know that Evelyn's condition didn't align with what the doctors were diagnosing. Tom glanced at the clock on the wall. The afternoon shift was winding down and the hospital had started to quiet down. He knew he couldn't waste any more time. He had to act before it was too late. Evelyn's life might be at stake. He couldn't sit by and watch her deteriorate just because of his own doubts. He had to do something, anything to help her. The decision weighed heavily on him. He could easily dismiss the thought, go home and pretend he hadn't seen the rash. He could go back to his mundane life of cleaning, doing his job, staying in his lane. But that didn't sit well with him anymore. The tiny clue he had found, the rash, wasn't just a minor detail. It was the key. It was the missing puzzle piece that could change everything. He couldn't ignore it. With newfound determination, Tom made his way to the nearest phone in the staff break room. He dialed the number for the head of medical staff. His hands were shaking as he waited for the line to connect. The hospital had been busy, but this was important. It was life and death. "Dr. Mitchell," Tom said once the phone was answered, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his chest. "I've been cleaning the hallways and I've noticed something about one of the patients, Evelyn Harrington. I think I've seen something that might help diagnose her." There was a long pause on the other end. Tom could hear the skepticism in Dr. Mitchell's voice as he responded. "Mr. Thomas, with all due respect, you're a janitor. What exactly are you suggesting here? You don't have any medical experience." Tom clenched his jaw. He knew he wasn't a doctor. He wasn't trying to be one. But he had seen things with his own eyes, things that couldn't be ignored. "I know I'm not a doctor, Dr. Mitchell, but there's a detail I think you've missed. It's small, but it might be important. I saw a rash on her neck, something subtle, but it matches symptoms of a rare poisoning. I've seen similar things before, just not in this hospital." Another pause. Tom could feel the weight of the silence as Dr. Mitchell processed what he'd said. Tom's hope began to fade as the doctor finally spoke. "Mr. Thomas, I appreciate your concern, but I assure you, Evelyn's condition is being handled by the best specialists in the field. I will look into this, but I don't believe it's something worth pursuing." Tom's heart sank. He had hoped for more than just a brush-off, but he couldn't give up yet. "I'm not asking for a diagnosis, Dr. Mitchell. I'm asking for you to look again. I'm telling you, I've seen it before. Poisoning, slow-acting, and I think it's what's happening to her." There was a long sigh on the other end of the line. "I'll review her case once more, Mr. Thomas, but I cannot make any promises. You understand that, don't you?" "Thank you," Tom said quietly before hanging up. The conversation hadn't gone as he hoped, but it was a start. He had made the first move. He couldn't help but feel like he was just a man in the background, but at least he had spoken up. At least he had tried. As the evening approached and the hospital emptied out, Tom continued his rounds, cleaning, mopping, doing what he was supposed to do. But his mind was still with Evelyn. He knew he had to do more. He couldn't just wait for the doctors to figure it out. He needed to go directly to Evelyn's family, to her people. He had to make them understand that the truth was right in front of them, even if they couldn't see it. That night, after his shift ended, Tom went home to Max, his son's innocent face offering him comfort. He had no idea how far he was willing to go for this, but something inside him told him that Evelyn's life was worth it. The following day, Tom couldn't shake the feeling of urgency that had settled deep in his chest. He had spent the night thinking about his conversation with Dr. Mitchell, and while he had received little more than a polite dismissal, he couldn't let go of what he knew to be the truth. He had seen it, the rash, subtle yet alarming, and his instincts told him it was more than a mere symptom of stress or a cold. As the morning shift began, Tom couldn't focus on his regular duties. The pressure of knowing Evelyn's life might hang in the balance weighed on him. He was just a janitor, after all. What did he know about medicine? But he knew people. He had spent years observing, watching, and listening, not just cleaning rooms, but noticing when something wasn't right. It was his attention to detail that kept him from missing the signs that others had overlooked. It was then that Tom made a decision. He had done what he could with Dr. Mitchell. Now it was time to take matters into his own hands. He waited until the hospital emptied out, the corridors quiet as the evening approached. Tom slipped away from his usual duties, quietly walking towards the restricted area where the Harrington family had been waiting. He had no permission to be there, but at this point the rules didn't matter. What mattered was Evelyn. The Harrington family was gathered in a private waiting room, and as Tom quietly knocked on the door, he hoped he wasn't making a mistake. Mr. Harrington, Evelyn's father, opened the door. He looked at Tom with surprise, his expression one of curiosity but tinged with the exhaustion of a father watching his daughter's health fail. "Mr. Harrington," Tom said respectfully, his voice steady but carrying a weight he couldn't hide. "I need to speak with you about Evelyn." Mr. Harrington glanced over his shoulder, seeing that the family was in the middle of a conversation with another doctor, before looking back at Tom. "Is something wrong?" Tom hesitated. It wasn't easy to walk into a world of wealth and privilege as a janitor and tell them that he, of all people, might have the answer they were desperately seeking. But he couldn't back down now. Evelyn's life was at stake. "I believe I know what's wrong with your daughter," Tom said quietly. "It's not what the doctors have said. I think she's been poisoned." Mr. Harrington raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Poisoned? That's a serious claim, Tom. Do you have any proof?" Tom nodded. "I've been working here for a long time. I know people, I observe things. I noticed a rash on Evelyn's neck, something subtle, but it stood out to me. It's a sign of poisoning, specifically a rare environmental contaminant. It's something the doctors haven't considered." For a moment, Mr. Harrington just stared at him, trying to process what he was hearing. Tom could see the wheels turning in his head, and he braced himself for the inevitable skepticism. But instead of dismissing him outright, Mr. Harrington motioned for him to follow. "Come with me," Mr. Harrington said, his voice calmer now. "Let's go talk to Evelyn's doctor. If you're right, then we need to act fast." Tom followed Mr. Harrington through the quiet hospital halls, his heart racing. He didn't know if he was doing the right thing, but at this point he couldn't back down. This was his chance to make a difference. When they reached the doctor's office, Mr. Harrington immediately explained the situation. The doctor, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, listened patiently as Tom explained his theory. At first, the doctor was dismissive, clearly skeptical of a janitor's ability to understand medical science. But Tom didn't falter. He spoke with quiet confidence, explaining how the symptoms Evelyn had been experiencing matched perfectly with the effects of slow-acting, poisoning, something that could be overlooked by even the best doctors if they weren't thinking outside the box. I'm not saying I'm a doctor, Tom added, but I've seen this before in patients with similar symptoms, and I think Evelyn's condition could be linked to something environmental, something no one has looked at yet. The doctor sighed, rubbing his temples. I'll review her case again, Tom, but I'm not sure how far this will go. You understand how much time and resources have already been spent? Tom nodded. He understood the weight of bureaucracy and protocol, but Evelyn's life was on the line and he wouldn't let that stand in his way. I just need you to test her for poisoning, Tom said firmly. I've seen what it looks like. And it's not something you find in standard tests. I know it. The doctor gave a reluctant nod. We'll run the tests, but you better be right. As Tom left the office, he felt a strange sense of hope for the first time in days. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a step. Evelyn might get the help she needed, and the doctors might finally have the missing piece of the puzzle. The next morning, Tom could barely sleep. He kept replaying the conversation he had with Mr. Harrington and the doctor, wondering if he had done enough. The clock ticked slowly as he walked down the hall, the weight of his decision settling heavily on his shoulders. He had done everything he could to get the doctors to take him seriously, but now it was out of his hands. All he could do was wait. At the start of his shift, Tom grabbed his cleaning supplies and pushed the cart through the sterile hallways, his mind still preoccupied with Evelyn. He had seen her from a distance in the waiting room earlier, her once pristine appearance now marred by the sickness that had slowly drained her life force. He could only imagine what she was going through, trapped in a body that no one could understand. Around noon, Tom was cleaning near the nurse's station when he overheard a conversation between two doctors. They were discussing Evelyn's case, but their words stung with the same dismissive tone that Tom had heard in their voices before. I can't believe we're still stuck on this, one of the doctors, Dr. Mitchell, muttered. It's just another rich girl who thinks she's got a special illness. We've run all the tests and they've come back normal. What more do they expect? The other doctor, Dr. Raymond, sighed. I don't know. I guess we'll run another test if Mr. Harrington insists, but I really don't see the point. We're wasting time. Tom clenched his fists, the anger bubbling up inside him. He had been right, hadn't he? They were dismissing Evelyn's illness as something trivial, just because she came from money, just because she was a woman who had everything. But this wasn't about wealth. It wasn't about status. It was about her life. Tom knew he couldn't let them dismiss her any longer. He couldn't let them keep ignoring the signs that were right in front of them. He had seen the rash. He had connected the dots. He knew it was poisoning, and if the doctors couldn't see it, he would have to make them see it. He couldn't do this alone. So Tom made his way to the doctor's office where he had spoken with Dr. Mitchell yesterday. The doctor was sitting at his desk, flipping through a chart. Tom stood in the doorway, his heart racing. I need to talk to you again, Dr. Mitchell, Tom said, his voice calm but firm. Dr. Mitchell glanced up, his expression tired. Mr. Thomas, we've already gone over this. You don't have a medical degree. I appreciate your concern, but you're not a doctor. Tom stepped into the office, his hands gripping the edge of the doorframe. I'm not a doctor, no, he said, his voice steady. But I've been around here long enough to know when something doesn't add up. You've missed something crucial. You've missed the poisoning. Dr. Mitchell sighed, clearly exasperated. We've run every test possible. There's no sign of poisoning. We're doing everything we can. Then run the right test, Tom insisted, his voice growing louder. I saw the rash. I've seen it before. You're not testing for the right kind of poison, and you're too blinded by your credentials to notice. If you keep ignoring this, Evelyn could die, and you'll never even know why. Dr. Mitchell stood up abruptly, his face red with frustration. You're crossing a line, Mr. Thomas. I don't care if you're a janitor or a doctor. You're not going to tell me how to do my job. Tom took a deep breath, trying to keep his temper in check. I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job. I'm telling you to listen. You think you know everything because you've got a degree, but sometimes it's the little things that make all the difference. Evelyn's life is at risk and you're about to let her slip away because you're too proud to consider a new theory. Dr. Mitchell stared at him, his jaw clenched. For a moment, there was only silence. Then with a resigned sigh, he nodded. "Fine," he said, rubbing his temples. "We'll run another round of tests, but this better not be some wild goose chase." Tom's heart pounded in his chest as he left the doctor's office. It wasn't a victory, but it was a step in the right direction. He had made them listen. Now all he had to do was wait. Later that afternoon, Tom was back on his rounds when he was called to the medical office. Dr. Mitchell and Dr. Raymond were standing together, holding the results of the tests. There was a new energy in their voices, a sense of urgency that hadn't been there before. "We ran the test for environmental poisoning." "Just like you suggested," Dr. Mitchell said, looking at Tom with a mixture of surprise and respect. "And you were right. We found traces of a rare toxin, something that could have gone unnoticed without the right test." Tom felt a rush of relief, but there was no time to relax. Evelyn's treatment needed to begin immediately. The doctors were stunned by the discovery, but for Tom it was just the beginning of the fight. Evelyn's life could be saved, but there was no guarantee. The clock was ticking, and this time the doctors were listening. The next 24 hours felt like an eternity for Tom. After the doctors had confirmed the presence of the toxin in Evelyn's system, things moved quickly, but the pressure was overwhelming. It was a rare and insidious poison, something that could have been easily overlooked had it not been for Tom's persistence. The doctors were finally taking action. Evelyn was rushed into intensive care, and the medical team immediately began administering the proper antidote. Tom wasn't part of the treatment, but he couldn't stay away. He stood in the hallway outside Evelyn's room, watching as nurses and doctors worked tirelessly. Despite the chaos, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had done something important, that he had somehow managed to be in the right place at the right time. As he stood there, watching through the small glass window in the door, he saw Evelyn's father, Mr. Harrington, pacing the floor. His face was grim, his anxiety palpable. Tom couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. He was just a janitor. How could he have possibly saved someone like Evelyn Harrington, someone so rich and powerful, with just a clue? The question lingered in his mind, but he pushed it aside. There was no time for doubt. Evelyn was still fighting for her life, and that was all that mattered. After what felt like hours, the door to Evelyn's room opened. Dr. Mitchell stepped out, looking tired but relieved. "She's stable for now," he said, his voice softer than before. "The antidote is working. We'll need to monitor her closely, but it looks like she'll pull through." Tom exhaled sharply, his body finally relaxing. The weight of uncertainty lifted from his shoulders, but the exhaustion still lingered in his bones. "Thank you," Mr. Harrington said, his voice filled with gratitude. I can't believe you found it, Mr. Thomas. You've saved my daughter's life." Tom nodded, but he didn't feel like a hero. He didn't want gratitude or recognition. He was just a man who saw something others missed, and that was enough for him. "It was nothing," Tom replied quietly. "I just noticed the rash. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make a difference." Mr. Harrington looked at him, eyes narrowed as if searching for something deeper. "I don't think you understand, Mr. Thomas. You didn't just notice a rash. You saw something that no one else did. You risked everything to make sure my daughter didn't die. That's not nothing." That's everything." Tom shifted uncomfortably. "I'm just a janitor, sir. I didn't do anything special." But Mr. Harrington wouldn't let him downplay it. "You're more than just a janitor. You're the reason my daughter is alive, and for that I will forever be grateful." Tom looked down, feeling the weight of the words. He had always felt invisible, insignificant. But now, standing in the hospital hallway, he realized that maybe he wasn't as invisible as he thought. Maybe he had more to offer the world than just cleaning floors. Dr. Mitchell interrupted the moment. "Mr. Thomas, I'd like to speak with you for a moment." Tom turned to him, surprised. "Yes, doctor?" "I owe you an apology," Dr. Mitchell said, his tone sincere. "I dismissed your observations without even considering them. I thought you were just a janitor, that you didn't have the knowledge to make a diagnosis. I was wrong. You saved Evelyn's life, and for that I will always be grateful." Tom was taken aback. He had never expected an apology from a doctor, especially someone as highly regarded as Dr. Mitchell. But here it was, an acknowledgement of the impact his small act of noticing had made. "I didn't mean to overstep," Tom said, his voice humble. I couldn't ignore it. I saw something and I couldn't let it go." Dr. Mitchell nodded. "It's rare for someone without formal training to see what you saw. But you were right. I underestimated you, and for that I'm sorry." Tom just nodded, feeling a rush of humility. In that moment, he realized that his instincts were more important than any title or degree. Sometimes it took a fresh perspective, a different set of eyes to see what was hidden in plain sight. As the day wore on, Tom stayed near Evelyn's room, quietly watching her condition improve. Her color returned and her breathing became more steady. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. She was out of danger for now. Tom left the hospital late that evening, exhausted but satisfied. As he walked out into the cool night air, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of pride. For the first time in years, he had made a difference. He had been the one to save Evelyn's life, not the doctors, not the family, but him. The janitor. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. He pulled it out and saw a message from his son, Max. "Dad, I finished my homework. Can we watch a movie tonight?" Tom smiled. He had saved a life today, but the most important part of his life was waiting for him at home. He quickly typed a response. "Of course. I'll be home soon. I love you." The days following Evelyn's recovery were a blur of gratitude and reflection. The moment the doctors confirmed her diagnosis, they worked tirelessly to reverse the effects of the poisoning. Evelyn's condition had stabilized, and within a few days she was able to sit up, her skin returning to its natural color, and her strength slowly returning. It was a miraculous recovery, all thanks to one small detail that Tom, a janitor with no medical background, had noticed. As Evelyn regained her strength, she insisted on meeting Tom to thank him personally. Mr. Harrington, her father, had been deeply moved by Tom's actions, and he made sure to express his appreciation. But for Evelyn, the gratitude went beyond the formalities. Tom sat in the hospital cafeteria, his thoughts still lingering on the events of the past week. It had been overwhelming. He was still the same janitor, just as he had been before the discovery. But the recognition, the respect that had come from saving Evelyn's life had opened something inside of him. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. He was a man who had seen something others missed. He had made a difference, Mr. Thomas. Tom looked up startled and saw Evelyn standing at the entrance of the cafeteria. She was wearing a simple dress, her face pale but much stronger than it had been just days before. There was a warmth in her eyes, a kindness that had been absent during her illness. "Evelyn," Tom said, rising to his feet. She smiled softly, her voice filled with sincerity. "I can't thank you enough for what you did. If you hadn't noticed that tiny clue, I'd be dead. I wouldn't be here right now. You saved my life." Tom shifted uncomfortably, shrugging slightly. "It wasn't much. I just noticed something that didn't add up. It was you who fought through it all." Evelyn's eyes filled with emotion. "You might think it was nothing, but it was everything. No doctor would have seen it. You were the one who helped me, not the specialists. I'll always be grateful for that." Tom could feel his throat tighten. He had never expected this kind of acknowledgement, especially not from someone like Evelyn. Her world was filled with doctors and experts, yet it was he, the invisible janitor, who had made the difference. But instead of basking in the praise, he felt a wave of humility wash over him. He hadn't done it for recognition. He had just done what felt right. "You don't need to thank me," he said quietly. "I did what I had to do. I couldn't just sit back and watch." Evelyn nodded. "And that's why I want to offer you something. I know you're a man of integrity. You don't want to accept anything for what you did, but I can't let you walk away with nothing. I want to make sure your life is as secure as mine. You've proven to me that you're capable of more than you know." Tom blinked in confusion. "What are you saying?" Evelyn smiled. "I want to offer you a position here at the hospital. Not as a janitor, but in a new role. Something that can use your instincts, your insight. You have an eye for detail that no one else has. I want you to be part of something bigger, a project that could help save lives." Tom felt his heart skip a beat. This was unexpected, more than he had ever imagined. But the offer was genuine, and Evelyn's words struck him deeply. The idea of stepping out from the shadows and becoming something more than just an invisible worker was almost too much to process. "I don't know what to say," Tom said, his voice low. "I'm just a janitor. I've never had any formal training." Evelyn stepped closer, her smile warm. "Sometimes it's not about degrees or titles. It's about seeing things others miss, knowing what to look for. You've got that gift, and I want you to use it. Not just for me, but for others. You've proven that you can make a difference." Tom was silent, his mind racing. For years he had lived in the shadows, working hard to provide for his son, Max. He had never sought fame or recognition, but to have someone of Evelyn's stature recognize his potential, it was a dream he had never allowed himself to have. "I'll think about it," he said, still in disbelief. "But what about Max? He's the most important thing in my life. I don't want to take any job if it means I won't have time for him." Evelyn's expression softened. "I understand, but this job can work with your schedule. It's flexible, and I'll make sure you have the time you need with your son. If you choose to do this, you'll have a place here with us. You'll never have to worry again." Tom felt the weight of her words, but beneath the weight something new began to stir. A hope he hadn't felt in years. He could have a future where he didn't just survive, but thrived. He could build a new life for Max with opportunities he had never imagined. "Thank you, Evelyn," Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never expected this. I'll take some time to think it over, but maybe this is the beginning of something good." Evelyn smiled warmly. "Take all the time you need. Just know that no matter what, you've already made a difference. And that's what matters most."